The first time I kissed my ex, he laughed. The last time he kissed me, he was kissing someone else behind my back. Cruel symmetry, isn't it? I never thought betrayal could taste like cheap bourbon and cigarette smoke, but that's exactly what lingered on my lips the night everything fell apart. I stumbled out of his apartment like a wounded animal, my chest burning with humiliation, my throat tight with words I couldn't scream. The rain had started to fall, the kind that wasn't dramatic or cleansing, just a steady drizzle that soaked through my shirt and made me feel pathetic. New York was merciless, as always. People walked past me, umbrellas snapping open, cabs splashing puddles against my legs. To the world, I was just another guy who got dumped. But inside, I was collapsing. I had no one to call. My friends had long faded into distant voices when I prioritized love over everything else. My family, well, let's just say gay, wasn't a word that found warmth in my father's vocabulary. And so, standing under the flickering neon sign of a diner, I realized I had only one place to go, or rather one person, Daniel. If ice could take human form, it would be Daniel Miller, my colleague from the marketing firm. He was precise, punctual, intimidating. His shirts always pressed, his tie never crooked. He rarely spoke more than necessary, and when he did, his voice carried that clipped tone that could slice through steel. For months, I had assumed he despised me or maybe just found me insignificant. He never joined us for after-work drinks, never laughed at my dumb jokes in meetings, never looked at me twice. And yet, in that desperate moment, his name was the only one my broken heart clung to. Maybe it was the way he once silently handed me a tissue during a presentation when I sneezed uncontrollably, or how he wordlessly adjusted the slide projector for me without being asked. Maybe it was because he was the only person who had never lied to me, simply because he never pretended to care. I found myself outside his apartment building at nearly midnight, shivering, drenched, and half hoping he wouldn't answer. But he did. And when the door opened, I saw a version of Daniel I'd never known. No suit, no tie, just sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt. His hair, usually slicked back, fell messily across his forehead. Ethan? His voice was calm, but his eyes flickered with something unguarded. Confusion, maybe, or worry. Two had nowhere else to go. I stammered, my voice trembling with the weight of my heartbreak. For a moment, silence stretched between us. I braced for rejection, for his cold, professional dismissal. But then he stepped aside. Come in. That small kindness cracked something inside me. His apartment was minimalistic, clean lines and muted colors, just like him. I stood awkwardly by the door, dripping rainwater onto his hardwood floor. Daniel disappeared into another room and returned with a towel. He held it out, not saying a word, but the gesture was enough to undo me. My throat burned as I whispered, "Thanks." I expected him to ask questions, but he didn't. He simply made tea, placed the steaming mug in front of me, and sat across the table. His eyes, normally sharp and distant, softened as they lingered on me. It was unbearable, because the more I felt his quiet concern, the more the dam inside me threatened to burst. And it did. He cheated on me, I choked out. My voice cracked, raw and unfiltered. 3 years, Daniel. 3 fucking years. And my hands trembled around the mug. He said I wasn't enough. That I never was. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the silence of his kitchen. Isn't that funny? I rearranged my whole life for him, and still, I was just a placeholder until someone better came along. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't tell me I'd be okay or that I deserved better. He didn't offer cliches or empty sympathy. He just watched me, his jaw tight, his fingers curled against the table as if holding himself back. And somehow that silence felt safer than any words. Finally, he said quietly, "He's wrong." The simplicity of it cut through me. I looked up, expecting sarcasm or indifference, but his expression stopped me cold. His eyes were steady, unflinching, and yet so unbearably gentle, like he was holding a truth he'd never dared to speak aloud. Something in that moment shifted. For the first time since the breakup, I wasn't drowning. His gaze was like a hand reaching into the storm, pulling me toward shore. And that scared the hell out of me. Because Daniel Miller, the man I thought incapable of warmth, was looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have guessed that night, was that behind those eyes lay a secret. One that would unravel both of us, piece by piece, until we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't ignore. And when the truth came out, it would make Daniel, the man who never cried, break down in front of me. Daniel let me crash on his couch. He gave me a blanket, then disappeared into his bedroom without another word. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest still raw with grief, but tinged now with something else. Something quieter. A strange sense of safety. In the morning, he was already dressed for work, coffee in hand, as if nothing unusual had happened. But when his eyes met mine, lingering just a second too long, I realized everything had changed. And that was only the beginning. I didn't realize how much I had started depending on Daniel until the silence of his apartment became as familiar as my own heartbeat. Days turned into weeks, and the bruises from betrayal slowly dulled, though they never fully faded. What replaced them was something far more complicated. A fragile connection with the man who had once been no more than a shadow in my office. At first, we existed in parallel lines. He'd sit across the living room reading reports, glasses perched on his nose, while I stared blankly at my laptop, pretending to work. He cooked simple meals without asking if I wanted any, but always made enough for two. And sometimes, when our hands brushed while reaching for the salt, he would pull back so quickly it was as if fire had licked his skin. But it was in the small cracks between his walls that I saw him. The way he lingered by the door each morning, as if torn about leaving me alone. The way his jaw clenched when I flinched at my phone lighting up with another useless message from my ex. The way his voice softened barely, but enough when he asked, "Are you sleeping better now?" I should have ignored it. I should have reminded myself that broken hearts cling to anything warm. But I couldn't, because beneath Daniel's cold exterior, I caught glimpses of something achingly human, something that mirrored my own loneliness. One night, after too much whiskey and not enough restraint, I finally asked, "Why are you helping me? You could have turned me away that night." Daniel's eyes flicked up from his glass. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, quietly, he said, "Because I know what it feels like." That sentence lived inside me for days, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. What did he mean? What had he endured behind those sharp suits and sharper silences? I got my answer sooner than expected. It happened on the rooftop of his building. He had dragged me up there on a Saturday morning, muttering something about needing fresh air. The sky was painted in bruised shades of pink and gold, the city still stretching awake. I stood at the edge, breathing it in, when I realized Daniel wasn't looking at the skyline. He was looking at me. His expression was bare, stripped of every layer of armor I had come to associate with him. His eyes shone, not with cold detachment, but with something rawer, almost desperate. "I kept my distance," he said suddenly, his voice unsteady, "because it was easier, safer. Watching you from across the office, laughing, smiling, it reminded me of everything I lost. Everything I couldn't have." My breath caught. "Daniel!" His chest rose and fell, his fists clenching at his sides. "The truth is, Ethan, I was in love once, and I lost him. Not because he cheated, not because he didn't care, but because I was too afraid to fight for him. Too afraid of what people would say. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. He was gone." His voice cracked. "So when I saw you broken, hurting, I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't let someone else I cared about believe they weren't enough." The tears in his eyes startled me more than the confession itself. Daniel Miller, the man who built walls of stone around his life, was crying. And that was when it hit me. The truth he had been hiding all along wasn't just about his past. It was about me. "You!" My voice trembled. "You care about me?" He let out a bitter laugh, swiping at his tears. "More than I should. More than I wanted to. And I hate myself for it. Because the last thing you need is another man dragging you into his mess." I didn't think. I moved. My hand found his, trembling but certain. You're not dragging me. You're saving me. His eyes widened, searching mine for hesitation, for fear. But there was none, because for the first time since my world had shattered, I felt something solid beneath my feet. And then, without ceremony, without hesitation, I leaned in. Our lips met soft, hesitant, but electric. It wasn't the desperate grasp of two broken people clinging to each other. It was something else entirely. It was a beginning. The city roared beneath us, alive and indifferent, but up there on that rooftop, it felt like the world had gone quiet. Just him and me. Two men scarred by different battles, finding refuge in each other. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, breathless. "You're going to ruin me," he whispered. Or maybe, I whispered back, "I'll heal you." Of course, life wasn't a fairy tale. The office buzzed with whispers when I moved back into my own place but started arriving at work with Daniel, sharing coffees, exchanging glances that lingered too long. Some colleagues looked at us with curiosity, others with judgment. I heard the snide comments, the muttered slurs. But the difference now was simple. I wasn't alone. Daniel stood by Menet as a shield, but as a partner. When my father found out and hurled words meant to wound, Daniel was there, his hand firm in mine, silent but unyielding. When my ex tried to crawl back into my life, Daniel's gaze reminded me that I was worth more than recycled lies. We stumbled, we argued, we nearly unraveled under the weight of fear and doubt. But every time we found our way back, because beneath all the pain, beneath all the scars, there was something undeniable. Love. Not the fragile kind that wilted under betrayal. Not the silent kind that rotted in the dark. But the stubborn, resilient kind that dared to bloom in the cracks of concrete. Months later, we found ourselves back on that same rooftop. The air was warmer, the city lights brighter. I leaned against him, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, his heartbeat steady against my cheek. "Funny?" I murmured. "How the worst night of my life led me here." Daniel kissed the top of my head, his lips lingering. "Sometimes, you have to lose everything to find what matters." I smiled, closing my eyes, letting the sound of the city fade into the background. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because no matter how cold the world tried to be, I had found warmth where I least expected it. In him. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.